Hey everybody, it's Romania Black. We are on episode 7 of Violet Evergarden, and I'm really excited because the last 2 episodes have been really good with this series. Episode 5 was really good, episode 6 was really good, a nice little self-contained story. Leon, who's voiced by the same voice actor as Atsushi from Bungo Stray Dogs, and then in episode 5, Prince Damien was voiced by Suda, the wonderful Suda, one of my favorite voice actors. I don't know why I didn't recognize him at first, but then going back and rewatching episode 5, his voice was a little more higher pitched than I'm used to, but I was like, oh man, 2 voice actors that I love playing our male characters in the last 2 episodes. And last episode, Violet getting to express that she does know what love means, she just doesn't realize that she knows. And Leon's like, you do know what love is. And it's like, but I really liked episode 6 as a nice little self-contained story. I was informed that in the light novel, which I am going to read the light novel whenever I'm done with the series. I'm going to read the light novel whenever I'm done with the whole series because of course I am. But I've been informed that in the light novel, he actually confesses to her. And they didn't spoil me on what her reaction was, but I was like, oh, it actually was a confession. Cool. Because it felt like it almost was going to be. And then she got out of range and I was like, damn it, he didn't get to confess. But in the light novel, apparently Leon does confess to Violet. So I'm curious to know what her reaction is. So yeah, don't spoil me. But I am going to be really curious to see what all ends up happening in the light novel with the scenes like this. So that's really exciting. But I am really excited to get into this. We're now in the second half of the series. We're past the halfway point. And honestly, in the last 6 episodes, Violet has grown a lot as a character. It doesn't seem like maybe she's changed a significant amount, but compared to episode 1 to now, she's really started to come out of her shell, get more emotional. She's had a pouty face. She's shown frustration. She's shown happiness. It's like, she's gone from being this blank slate to a character that has human emotions and is expressing them and understands what love really is, just doesn't realize it and doesn't know exactly how to express that in words in a letter to Gilbert, which is what we're all waiting on, right? So I'm really excited to see what happens here in episode 7 as we enter the halfway point and move into the second half of the series. I'm really excited. So yeah, let's just dive in, shall we? We are going to start episode 7 of Violet Evergarden. And we're going to start that here in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let's go. Oh, buddy. That was not, oh man, y'all told me this show gets you right in the emotions. This episode was the one that started it. And I have a feeling it's all downhill from here. It's all downhill from here. Welcome to the second half of the series. That just hit really hard. I tell everybody on my channel, I'm like, I don't get that emotional watching things. I rarely cry. And I feel like in the last month, with like 4 different shows, I've cried. And I'm like, why? What is happening? But everything's just hitting. And this episode, there's some personal things. And I think that's what really got me. But there's some personal things that really hit home in this episode. But man, oh my gosh. Just this episode getting, I love that the play sets us up with the idea that the play is a metaphor for, and the writer of the play is him. So he's the guy that wrote the play. I didn't connect the dots between the writer and the picture of him, but he's the author of the play that's having writer's block that she's the scribe for. So he's the one that Erica wishes she could have been the scribe for, but it's given to Violet instead. That's kind of sad that Erica doesn't get to be the scribe for her favorite playwright, but fair enough. I like the idea that I must live with my sin now. That as Violet's been slowly gaining her humanity back and just slowly recognizing all these emotions, there's remorse and guilt. And Violet's killed people. Like Dithard said, he's like, you're responsible for many of my men dying at your hand. And you did it like as an emotionless child. And we don't know the circumstance, but that's not what Violet's sad about. She's sad about the fact that the people that she killed, she's like, they all had families and they had lives. And I've taken that away from them. just like Olivia was taken from Oscar. And so it's so sad, her realizing this, and then we'll get to Gilbert. Oh my gosh, which I'm glad with Gilbert, but then we'll talk about this. But man, so her going to the playwright's house, to Webster's house, old Oscar, and I love that you instantly get, like, he says that I can't say her name because it makes me so sad. And it's funny, he's named the character of his play instead of Olivia, it's Olive. So he can't fully say the name, but the influence is still there, right, with his own characters. But him commenting that her and Violet have similar hair colors, and so that's what reminds him of her. But going in the house, like, everything's in disarray. There's, like, clothes on the ground. There's, like, paper crumpled up. There's, like, shards of glass. And there's dirt on the floor. Like, the pictures are crooked and angled. There's liquor everywhere. It's very clear that he's not been taking care of himself. And he's just let everything go into disarray because, you know, his daughter's died and his wife's died, so he's by himself. I wasn't expecting such a child. And he still wears the wedding ring. You know, he still wears the wedding ring, so he's not ready. He doesn't want to move forward or move away from the idea of his wife. He's just, you know, he's still, and his hand's shaking from, you know, all the alcohol. And she's like, and I like that Violet is very stern. She's very polite, but she's like, I ask that you refrain from drinking alcohol. And then when he doesn't, she's like, you're being difficult. I love it. It's so great because Violet's very polite to a fault, and she's not mean-spirited or condescending or nagging, but she's like, you're being a little difficult. Like, she's just, she's doing it in the best way she can, and I love it. It's so endearing. But yeah, just everything is in disarray. And him asking what happened to your hand. And he's actually the first person who's literally asked her what happened. And she's like, oh, I lost in the war, but it won't affect my work. And then he's like, And I absolutely love that. Well, first we'll get to that, but he sends her, like, on the task to get food stuff to make. And it's funny because when you think about it, they probably have pre-prepared meals that they ate while they were in the army. So they didn't have to cook. They didn't have time to cook their own meals. They just had prepackaged things probably that they could eat on the go. So the idea of sitting down and making a meal isn't something that Violet's ever done. And it didn't hit me. And so her trying to make the eggs and it all just going horribly wrong. And her being like, and then him finally, like, helping her. And the fact that the meal she made is the same as the meal that him and his daughter were eating before. But kudos, Violet's like, I'm hiding the alcohol until we get this project done because you need to be in good health for it. And so, the show's attention to detail is so good in this because they show him, like, as he's talking to her, he's, like, fiddling with his hand, like, trying to distract him from the fact that he's not drinking. And it's like, it's great. And so, I love that Violet gets so into the play. Like, she gets sucked into it. As she's typing it, she's listening to the story, and she's reading it with him, and she gets sucked into the characters and play and starts to ask questions like, well, how are they going to win? How's this fire going to be extinguished? What's going to happen? And I love that the fire metaphor, it's a metaphor for fire in the play, that they have to put out the fire to cross the lake and get back. And then later on we establish that Violet is burning. Like, she's burning from all this guilt and frustration and sadness and anger at everything she's done. And it's like, how do you put that fire out? And it's the same thing here. It's just the metaphor and the analogy of the play and the fire in her is so good. Like, that's such a subtle little detail. And they don't draw back to it. But when you rewatch and you see that's what they're talking about, it's like, oh, it's so brilliant. I love that. And he's like, you're feeling these emotions because that's what the protagonist is supposed to feel. Like, Olive is supposed to feel these emotions, so you're feeling them. And he's like, you feel empathy towards Olive. And that idea of feeling what someone else does, that empathy is like, you know, Violet's like, oh, this is a different concept than I'm used to. It's like, I love it. And then his hands making the heart and everything. He's like, I'm relieved you feel that way because this is my first time writing a children's play. And so I wondered at first, because when he was first writing it, when he was first telling her the dialogue, I was like, this is a little simplistic. You know, you're a famous playwright. It's a little simplistic. But when he said it's a play for children, it's like, oh, okay, well, of course it needs to be a little bit simplified so that they get it. But Violet, you know, even though she's older, I think, than she looks, in a lot of ways, she still has the heart of a child. So she gets so enamored and wrapped up into the play itself. It's so good. It's so good. And then him like going through the writing process with her. And she's just like, oh no, how will she return home? And he's like, she's lost her boat. And he's like, oh, I haven't figured that out yet. And then she's like, oh, you have to figure it out. She's like, you have to. She's like, she can't return to her father who's waiting for her. And that's what gets him. That line. Where he's like, no, it hits too close to home. And he has to go out and he has to go upstairs. And it's like, oh my gosh, like him just, and then looking at the lake with the leaves. And then she finds the parasol, and he's like, oh, it's just a parasol, and that's her favorite thing. And that brings back all the emotions and reminds him, and it's like the trigger. And he's just like, oh, and that's too much. And I love that they just showed him like slumped over and like he's so dark and everything's in shadows. And then like the show does such a good job of using lighting and colors and just the way his expression is to just show those emotions. And then he sees her with it open, and he's like, that's the last thing he wants to see. And the one day, I promise to show you one day. And then she's obviously like, you're upset. And then, oh my gosh. I wanted to finish the story I told Olivia. And then we get into the story about the kid and the fact that he lost his wife. And then they don't say it, but it's like the child, she got cancer, didn't she? I mean, because it shows her like emaciated and just like skin and bones. And it's like she probably got like an equivalency in this world to whatever cancer is for a kid, like leukemia or something. And that just hits so close because I've lost a family member to cancer, and it's like, ugh. And then I had a friend whose child had cancer, and it's like, and lost their child to cancer. So it's like all that emotion just like floods in you watching this, because the show just perfectly portrays that dad's relationship with her, and her talking about walking on the water and walking on the leaves and wanting to try to cross the lake, and then being like the bird. And then when Violet reiterates that without realizing that that's what the kid said, like that was just like, right in the feels, just in the feels. It's like, oh my God. And then KyoAni's like, well, we have to include a lake. We have to include some body of water in this amazing moment because that's what we do. We animate water. And it's like, oh my God. And just, I love Violet with her hair down, like in that one moment where she's sad too. That's the part that got me too, because that's the part that got me too, is that Violet has shown slowly emotion after emotion over a period of time. Like she's shown happiness and she's shown frustration, and she's like, even was a little aggravated here at the beginning with him, but she's like parting with someone who's important to you, never being able to see them again. And then she's like, I never knew it was so sad. And we see her crying and painful. And then even after all that, because, you know, she's feeling so sad. And, okay, so y'all have commented on this, and it's blowing my mind. But a lot of you have commented that because she can't feel things, because she doesn't have hands, technically, they're robotic. She doesn't have sensation in her fingers. Because of that, she puts things to her face and to her mouth to touch. So like the dog toy, and she puts the brooch to her mouth to touch it with her teeth so she can see it, sense it, she can feel it. It's like, ah! And even after all that, she's like, you're the one suffering. Like she's putting him before her. And she's so pretty with her hair down. And he's like, I want to finish Olive's story, that the girl will reach her home and reunite with her father. No matter how difficult the adventure, she'll get a happy ending. I want the protagonist and the audience to be happy. Oh, man. And Violet's so happy because she's like, that's all I want. And so I love the idea that they have of him asking her, like, what do you think we should do? How do you think it should end? And she's like, well, we could take a plane. He's like, well, that's not imaginative for a kid's story. And then they come up with the idea of the parasol. and the spirit, the water spirit, like the air spirit, helping her fly over the lake. And oh my gosh. And it's reenacting what Olivia wanted, was to cross the lake by jumping on the leaves. And he tells her to reenact it, and then I love that he's like, oh, I'm just joking, but she does it anyway. And it's like KyoAni, flexing your skills, right? Just flexing your skills. Her jumping over with the parasol, and she clearly isn't gonna make it. She's not gonna make it, but I love, she's like, I got 3 steps in. But just the water, and then her like touching it, and then the one day wish. I promise to show you one day, and it's just like walking on the leaves and everything, and that, oh God, it's so gorgeous. And he's like, how I wish to hear you, I could hear you call me that 1,000 times more. And then it just gets so sad because he's like, he relives all the moments with his daughter, and he's like, I wanted you to grow up and have all these experiences and lived. And she doesn't get that. And it's just like, oh, and him holding her hand, and how I wished for that for you. Oh my gosh. And then her grabbing his hand. Damn. I feel so bad because he's still by himself at the end of it. It's like, oh man. But I mean, the hope is he can move forward. And then Violet's like, did you see that? And she was so proud of herself. And then she's like, oh no. And he's just crying. Are you feeling ill? After granting me this miracle, I told her, I don't believe there's a God, but if there were, it would be you. Like she was his saving grace in that moment. And then him giving her the parasol. Show. But then it doesn't end there, right? It doesn't end there. It could have ended there, and it could have been just as sad. He's like, you were able to fulfill Olivia's one day wish. One day. And that's when it hits Violet. That's when it hits her. Is that all the things she's done, that she has to live with this sin now. And the idea of her burning, and of Hodgins telling her, and she's like, no, I'm not burning, but she is. And oh my gosh. And we go back, and I want to just see like that of her on the bed thinking of it with the very, and going back to those words from episode 5 that Dithard told her, and your body's on fire, burning up. And then going back to the battlefield, to everything, and then her going back to seeing Gilbert, and him telling her to live, and she's like, am I allowed to live? Do I deserve it? And he's like, be free. And she's like, do I deserve that after everything I've done? And obviously Gilbert thought she did, you know. But her realization that she's taken lives and taken away those one day wishes that father's daughter never had, and the people had loved ones, and just all of that hitting her at once. It's just, oh my God, it's so visceral. It's like all these emotions finally coming to play. And so then we could have had it in there, right? We had the sad thing with the dad. We had this sad moment of Violet realizing everything she's done, and like having this enormous weight put on her, and we could have ended it there. But you know what? This show was like, nah, we ain't ready to end there. Let's give you a third shot of pain. 3rd time's a charm, right? Because she sees Gilbert's family, and she apologizes. And it's crazy how much she's grown from episode 1 to this episode, and how much she has changed. And they're like, oh no, it's fine. They're like, we're so glad that you've, grown up. I'm sure now Gilbert can rest in peace. And as soon as she said that, I was like, oh no. Because that's confirming. At first I was like, are we confirming that he's died? It's like, I'm sure Gilbert can rest in peace too. But here's the thing. We don't have a body. No death, no body. No body, no death. No. And her going to Hodgins, being like, you said he was alive. And Hodgins admitting that he was too cowardice to tell her. And she's like, he's alive, right? And Hodgins being like, look, I couldn't tell you. I couldn't bring to tell you myself. But see, they say after the battle that they found her, you were alone on the ground under a church. So, which was by where he was. He pushed you away before it was bombarded. And while we didn't find his body, we did find his ID tag under the debris. But that's no body! No body! She's like, so we don't know. Yeah, exactly. She's like, no. So he was deemed missing in action. Given the situation, she's like, I'm sure he's alive. And she's like, he's alive. I don't understand. I won't. Oh man, how could I be the only one to survive? The Major was there with me. And I wanted her to tell him so badly that he told her that he loved him. And she's like, no, and she runs away. And Benedict saw her run away, so I wonder if Benedict's going to go after her in the next episode, but... And there's no title. There's no title! I cannot. Oh my gosh. I'm fully convinced he's still alive. I'm with Violet. I'm convinced he's still alive until they show us a body. Gilbert's alive. He's just MIA. I wonder if Dithard and them took him away. Because here's the deal. Dithard wasn't like, oh, well, your precious Major's dead. Like, he wasn't like, you killed my brother or anything like that, or my brother died for you. Like, he didn't say anything like that in episode 5. Like, anything like that. So, Dithard sounds like enough of a jerk that if he really wanted to rub the salt in the wound and make her feel bad, he would have been like, oh, my brother died saving you, or said something like that. But he didn't. And they told the family that he was dead. So, maybe he's like, with Dithard, like, under his care, just like, you know, in a coma or something. I don't know, but I refuse to believe he's dead. I refuse to believe he's dead. Not after all this. I'm like, no, because we're setting up the whole thing where Violet, like, Gilbert is to Violet what Olivia was to the dad. Like, that love, that unconditional love. And that they're waiting for them to return. And I'm like, no, that's exactly what's happening. And... Show, how could you? Oh man, this episode was so good. Just like the themes about the unconditional love and the one day, and that everybody meaning something to someone else, like everyone having a loved one in their life and having value to that person, and the father having the writer's block now that his wife and daughter are gone, and Violet helping him to gain that peace of mind and to write the play where his daughter comes home to him to at least give him that peace. And then Violet coming to terms with her own sin, with what she's done, and realizing, you know, how does she move forward? So I'm wondering that next episode if we deal with the aftermath of that. And then now she finally confronted Hodgins, asking him if Gilbert's alive or not. And Hodgins saying that he thinks Gilbert's dead. But I'm like, no. I'm like, now the letter's going to be so much more sad, because if she writes the letter thinking that he's dead, oh, show. This episode got me. Episode 3 got close. I was tearing up in episode 3, but this episode, full force. And we're just now starting the second half. So I can't imagine where it's going to from here. But God, Violet's development, the talk she had with Oscar, the animation of her overcoming the lake, all of that. It was so gorgeous. So gorgeous. And here we are. Ugh. I'm curious to know your thoughts down below. Please don't spoil me on the actual fate of Gilbert. I'm sure we will find out by the end of this. But I'm on Team Alive. I'm on Team Gilbert's alive. That's my team. That's my theory. And I'm sticking to it until no body, no death. I'm on that train. So I'm curious to know your thoughts below about this episode. It hit me personally, so many beats of this, because I've seen it, like kids dying to disease and parents being left by themselves and then losing family members. Like, it's just so personal that the animation of him ugly crying, and it just washed over. It was like the meme where it's No Face from Spirited Away, and the waves that have the word feel on them just like washes over him. That was it. That was this episode. So I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and yeah, I'm excited to talk to you down in the comments below, but I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe and take care, and I'll be back again soon with more Violet Evergarden. Bye.